Hello and welcome. My name is Nicholas Roman Lewis, and I want to thank you for tuning in to this session of our Impact Series, A Just World with the Honorable Carlos Moreno and Eva Blanco Masias. I am personally delighted to introduce our two speakers as they have both had an impact on my life. So let me just The Honorable Carlos Moreno has had a distinguished 25-year career on the judiciary, including 10 years on the California Supreme Court. During his tenure, Justice Moreno authored 140 major opinions on a wide range of precedent-setting cases, including significant opinions implicating LGBT rights, arbitration class action waivers, and insurance policy coverage. Previously, he served 15 years as a trial judge in state and federal courts, presiding over hundreds of trials, covering the full spectrum of criminal and civil litigation. Most recently, Justice Moreno served as United States Ambassador to Belize, where he made great strides in advancing citizen security within Belize and the region, focusing on citizen protection, economic development, and governance. Justice Moreno is a first-generation Mexican-American and fluent Spanish speaker. He was the third Latino to serve on the Supreme Court of California and has been honored with numerous accolades for his work on and off the bench. He has served many community-based organizations, boards, and is currently an alumni fellow on the Yale University Board of Trustees. Eva Blanco Masias is Vice President for Enrollment Management at Santa Clara University in Silicon Valley. She has been at SCU for 17 years, previously serving as Dean of Undergraduate Admissions. During her tenure, SCU has seen a record number of applications and expanded its national and international reputation. Eva joined Santa Clara University after a successful career in media and marketing that included USA Networks, the Weather Channel, Fox Latin American Channel, and Discovery Networks Latin America. In her various roles at Santa Clara since, she has leveraged her experience to elevate SCU's brand recognition and launch innovative programs, broadening SCU's enrollment access to a wide range of intellectually charged and socially minded students around the world. Her civic involvement spans service on several nonprofit boards, including the Foundation for Hispanic Education, as past president of the National Catholic College Admissions Foundation, and as the inaugural chair of the Yale Latino Alumni Association, to name a few. Eva is a first-generation college graduate and is fluent in Spanish. And last but not least, she has been my friend for over 30 years. Eva, take it away.
Nicholas, thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here, and thank you to the Yale Alumni Association for this invitation and for putting together this kind of programming and event, because it celebrates the diversity of Yale, of its students and alumni, but it also reinforces the commitment to making Yale more inclusive. So I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to be here with my friend, Justice Carlos Moreno. Can I call you Carlos today, Carlos?
Of course, Eva, we're all friends.
Awesome, awesome. Well, I've known you for so many years, and you've always been a present figure in my college journey. So I consider you a mentor, a friend, and I think I speak for a lot of Yaleys in saying that we truly admire you for your success, your advocacy, and really grateful for your commitment in making the world a better place, but also Yale a better place, especially for Latinos. So let's dig in. I'm really excited to get into this conversation and really take a journey through your life. And so why don't we just get started on where we are right now? You're retired, and although I think of sort of beaches and, you know, piña coladas, and if that were my retirement, I know that you're keeping busy. So tell me about the curiosities that kind of occupy your mind right now. What are you keeping busy with these days?
You know, well, like a number of retired people, I'm busier than I ever was. But I think what I like about my current station in life is that I'm really devoted to the highest and best use of my time, kind of a real estate term. And that means practicing law as a neutral or an arbitrator in some sense, but not absorbing all of my time. I'm really devoting probably the majority of my time to outside activities, serving on different governmental boards and commissions, ranging from redistricting to vetting individuals who are applying for judgeships, federal and state, being on different boards, and also great honor of serving on the Yale Corporation as an alumni fellow. Who would have thought that, as a Yale student from 1966 to 1970, that Carlos Moreno would someday serve on the Yale Corporation board? Because back in those days, this was something just very, very far removed, very far removed from anything that I or even my classmates anticipated. We thought that people on the board were, just utterly highly accomplished people connected to not only Yale, but to government and large corporations and so forth. But here I am, and it's, as I said, I'm busier than ever doing all of these things. So that's where I am.
Yeah. Well, we're happy to have you on the corporation. Certainly it's important to have a place at the table, and you certainly are representing well and with a lot of experience. And no doubt, Yale recognized your talent and your intellect, certainly when you got accepted to Yale. And they made the right decision on you. But how did you choose Yale? Tell us about young Carlos, about your family, about where you came from and how you got to Yale, because someone who lives, on the opposite side of the country, you're from LA, I'm from LA, first to go to college from your family.
Yeah.
And mind you, in the 60s, there's a lot going on during that time. How did you decide on Yale?
That's a good question. I've given that some thought. It's only recently that the term first gen has been adopted by the colleges and so forth. And I think it's an apt term. I was the first one to graduate from college. Why Yale? Why the East Coast? I think I was always encouraged by teachers, even in elementary school, to sense that I could do things, I could do better. So I always had very good positive reinforcement wherever I went, beginning in elementary school. So I always set my goals quite high. When I think about it, back in the 8th grade, I remember talking to a college counselor about what would be the best college to go to if I wanted to be a physicist. I was more science-minded then, and he said Caltech, and I said, okay, I'll go to Caltech. And that idea just sort of stayed in my mind. I always thought of what's the best school. And certainly when John F. Kennedy was president, elected in 1960, he'd gone to Harvard, and I certainly set the East Coast, the Ivy League, as a goal. And then in high school, I had a friend whose brother had gone to Harvard, or was at Harvard. So I didn't feel that was an insurmountable sort of thing to do. I went to a school that was about 90% Latino, and most students either did not go to college or they went to a local community college, East LA College, or to one of the local state schools. That never crossed my mind, actually. I always wanted to get away, and there was a sense of adventure, being 17 years old, and you just jump into things, not being fully apprised of everything that you might have to do. And I'm sure this was true for you too, Eva, to venture across the country to a place like Yale with little or no guidance, and certainly no real clear idea what lied ahead for you until you got there. So, why did I apply to Yale? I applied to a number of schools on the East Coast, and fortunately I got into Yale, and I think that's probably the best choice I ever made. Was to follow my instinct and go east and go to a place like Yale.
Well, I'm certainly glad you did, and life has transformed you and transformation for many Yaleys who've come behind you. So when you got there, you were one of 3 Chicano Latinos in your class.
Right.
They referred to you as Los Hermanos.
Yes.
So what was your Phelps Gate story? You know, what
Okay.
was it like to transition to Yale, you know, life? And, you know,
Yeah.
where did you find community? Where did you, you know, find others that you connected with? What was that
Right.
transition
Right.
like?
Right. Well, referring back to Los Hermanos, which means the brothers, uh, later people have asked me, was that a singing group? Was that, a religious a group of monks? But no, it was just a group of people who had similar life experiences and took the same daring step that I did. But my Phelps Gate story is that I took a red eye from Los Angeles to get to New York City like at 6 a.m. in the morning, and somehow found my way to Grand Central Station and took a train to Yale. And I probably arrived at Yale around 10 a.m. in the morning and reported to Phelps Gate, and I was given a key to my room, 342 Wright Hall, and someone, maybe it was one of the attendees there, the attendants or one of the officers pointed diagonally across the old campus. And I walked with my 2 big suitcases, an overcoat, probably an umbrella, tennis racket, I remember that, and thinking that what awaited me. Uh, there were 2 bedrooms and a living room, nice rooms for students, I thought. Fireplace in those days. And the single room was already occupied by a local admittee from Hamden. So I went into the room with bunk beds, and I took the bottom bunk. There was nobody in the room at all, or in the suite, and laid down because I'd been up mostly all night. Looked up, and I saw the underpinning of the bunk bed, and it said property of Yale University. So in my mind, I said to myself, my God, I'm here. I've made it. So it's funny that, over 50 years later, I'd still remember that sense of accomplishment, that sense of anticipation.
Yeah.
And I have to say that sense of, what's next? What did I get myself into? But in those days, and I was just very, very confident that I belonged there, I could do the work, and it was going to be a challenge, but ultimately, this would be where I would spend the next 4 years, no doubt about that.
Mhm. And, you know, for me, while I was there, Mecha became a great source of community and support for me. And, you know, now La Casa represents that same place for
Yeah.
many Yaleys. You know, there's so organizations and spaces on campus that have been really important. What was your role in starting organizations on campus? I know you played a role in you know, what is there for Latinos now as support. Tell us about those days.
Yeah, at some point, early in my freshman year, I met Joaquin Avila,
Mhm.
who was kind of a landmark voting rights lawyer. He later went to
Yeah.
Harvard Law School and became a
Legend himself, yes.
legend, right? Uh, and then probably towards the end of our sophomore year, we found that there were other Latinos, mostly Mexican American, not a huge number, but we got together with them by searching through the old campus book and just made a door-to-door survey to see, just introducing ourselves, and we said we're forming an organization, and we'd like them to be part of that organization. By the end of our junior year, we had 15 members. We organized, not surprisingly, around Mexican food. I
Mhm.
think there was only one sort of faux Mexican restaurant in the New Haven area that was not any good. So we got together, and this is a funny story. At one of the markets on Broadway, we found, believe it or not, canned tortillas, canned tamales, but canned, sauce. And our first idea was to make enchiladas. And with the help of Don Nakanishi, who was class of 71, Japanese American, but he, went to Roosevelt High School, the Mexican American high school. We sort of fashioned from memory how to make enchiladas, how they should look, it's how they should taste, etc. And that just started a series of things, getting together to cook food, Mexican food. And later, of course, and this is probably common to your generation as well, whenever we traveled home, we would come back with a suitcase load of, tortillas or other ingredients to make
Right.
Mexican dishes. So I tell people when they ask, what did you learn at Yale? I said, I learned how to cook Mexican food. I hadn't cooked before, but this was an opportunity to sort of connect with home. Another way of connecting with home was by reading what was going on the West Coast. And that sort of gets into our organization of Los Hermanos, which became United Mexican American Students, UMAS. And later, I think in my junior year, latter part of the junior year, became MECHA. So we were all intently following sort of the demonstrations and the high school walkouts in Los Angeles and in other Mexican American populated cities. So that activism, a lot of it centered around the Vietnam War and other injustices that were being imposed upon disenfranchised people. So the Black Panthers were sort of at their height there in the latter 60s. So we kind of followed what was going on and in our own way, formed our own sort of political consciousness, if you will, which culminated with the May Day, demonstrations at Yale in 1970. So pretty much for the last 2 years of, my time at Yale, we were very politically engaged in ways that ultimately proved to be successful, but there's still more work to be done. And I'm thinking in terms of admissions to the college, faculty diversity, which I know Yale is making great strides in trying to achieve more equity and diversity in its faculty, and also in the curriculum. There was no really curriculum within American studies or others about ethnic studies, certainly not for Mexican Americans. And it was during my time at Yale that, the Black Student Cultural Center was founded, and also courses relating to Black studies were started. Don Nakanishi, who I mentioned, through something known as the Hall Seminars, created a course on Asian American studies, and I formed a counterpart at Pearson College on Mexican American studies. And Yale had the foresight and gave us the latitude to create our own courses. And I designed a 13-week seminar on Chicano or Mexican American studies, exploring the history and novels and everything, trying to just put together something that reflected where we, as a segment of society, stood in the greater society.
Wow, that's really great history to hear. Yeah. And both you, Joaquin Avila, Don Nakanishi, I mean, these are big names in advocacy, nationwide. I think of Don, who is the godfather of Asian American studies, right? He was the chair at UCLA, and Joaquin Avila, and his advocacy in voting rights, and certainly all you've done. So it's great history for us to know, and that advocacy continues, and I'm grateful that Yale continues to expand, access, right? There's still a lot of work to be done. Being at a university campus, I see how those conversations need to continue. So let's forward into a little bit of your sort of professional journey. As I mentioned, you're a giant in your field. You've always been a fighter for social justice and advocacy for families, and you know, you have admirers in every political persuasion. And so, you know, but I'm curious, where did that calling begin? You certainly brought it to Yale, and, you know, we just heard a bit about what you did while you were there, but where did that start? Where did that fire ignite?
Well, you know, I mean, I think everything begins in your family and childhood experiences. And I don't have any really dramatic, you know, experiences that sort of shaped my life. But I did have a family. I think some would call it a fractionalized family, because I never lived with my father, but was raised by my mother as the fifth, the youngest of five kids. And we lived with her brother, my uncle. And I think two things. One, my mother was not very, very political, but she just stood in my mind when I think about it. And maybe a lot of people say this about their mothers, so it may sound a bit trite, but she was just a very fair, very kind woman, not even a smidge of prejudice. And she would look at people and animals very, very kindly. So I think that perspective I got from her. From my uncle, both were from Mexico, by the way. He worked for 43 years at the Railway Express Agency, which was like the FedEx of its day, but using trains and you know, shipping cargo and unloading cargo, parcels basically. And from him, you know, I got the sense that, well, two things. One, that Franklin Delano Roosevelt saved the country, because he had a job during the Depression, and my mother admired FDR as well, and John F. Kennedy and the Pope. But through him, I got a sense of how important unions were. He was a union man, you know, didn't espouse it in any kind of real loud or activist way, but he really felt indebted to the union for keeping him employed from the time he arrived in the United States in 1919 to the time he retired in 1963. One company, you know, always at work, you know, never sick, etc. You've heard that story before. But that was also a role model for me, to be steady, to be moderate, to not be intemperate. So it was that kind of family setting. So when I think about where I get my sense of being and fairness, I have to go that far back, along with the encouragement I got academically and socially from teachers. I owe a lot to the teachers who saw something in me, even beginning in grammar school and high school and in college, that, you know, I was never told, and I've heard that it's quite common among Latinos. I can tell you stories where people are told, well, you can't be a lawyer. Ha ha ha, particularly to Latinas. Times have certainly changed, but I can say that at least I don't recall anybody ever putting me down by saying I couldn't do something. So when I asked that college counselor in the 8th grade, I wanted to go to the best school, and he said Caltech, hey, I just ran with it. So, and I think that kind of self-confidence and positive reinforcement goes a long way. So I always conduct myself that way when I'm advising. So I was talking to someone just a couple of hours ago about becoming a federal judge. You give them the props, you tell them what they do. You don't say you can't do it. I've never told anybody. I give them the real story, but I never tell anybody, no, you can't do that. Who am I to judge on saying that? But I've been very fortunate that that I've always been able to seize the time, be prepared, and to move forward. And what I tell students, I mentor students at one of the local high schools here, mostly Latinos. And I tell them that in the course of your life, you're going to have many doors of opportunity coming your way. But guess what? You better be standing next to the door when that door opens, because there's going to be a lot of people who are going to want to get in. So in my mind, preparation, a good education, and hard work, those are the things you need to succeed, because it's inevitable that there will be opportunities coming your way, and you have to be there and you have to be ready.
Yeah, that's right. Well, you certainly have been prepared, but you're also a man of first, and sometimes the only, right? And what comes with that very often is being able to introduce new perspectives and new ideas, to new audiences. And so you've brought some really unique perspective to the courts and in your work in advocacy for family rights, gay marriage, individual rights.
Right.
So in this advocacy, what has guided your work? What are the principles that have guided the work you do, and what are you most proud of when you reflect on your life of service?
That's a good question, and I'm most proud of my role actually in gender diversity and equality, particularly in California. I was very fortunate to be on the Supreme Court when we had a series of cases dealing with the gender equality, culminating in the gay marriage, initial gay marriage decisions, and then dissenting when the California voters reversed our initial decision on that, later to be vindicated by the U.S. Supreme Court. And I've always felt that these barriers that society has set up that are based on just plain bias and prejudice and values that really never were legitimate in my view. So I think certainly in terms of my legal career, I've always felt that was kind of the hallmark of my career. But also, I think in other cases, when you say what is my guiding principle, it is due process, equal access to justice, fairness, if you will, looking at people as individuals under the circumstances that have brought them before the court or a particular place in society, never really condemning someone for, not having the best of circumstances in their lives. There's always an explanation, I think, and always trying to see the best in people and understanding that. I really feel like in many ways, I dodged a bullet. I mean, people have told me that, how did you do that? And I said, I just always kept my eye on the ball, I guess. And as I said, I always had positive reinforcement. But, growing up in a very modest neighborhood in an area known as Chavez Ravine, or right next to Chavez Ravine, it was a very mixed, working class neighborhood. But I was able to sort of move on from there, as many others have moved on. And as you point out, in many instances, I was the first or the second or the third, whatever, in many of the things that I've been able to accomplish. And I just think that having kind of a positive sense of oneself and taking chances, if you will, and putting yourself out there, and not getting so that you're going to feel you might be rejected for whatever reason. I mean, I've had a few rejections, but you just move on. You just got to plug away. I guess that's another theme I've thought about. I just keep on plugging away, and you move forward. Someone once gave me some advice, and that was to have a 5-year plan. I became a judge because I said, where do I want to be when I'm 40? And ever since then, like every 5 years or so, more or less, I always think of where I am in terms of what else I want to do. I think, as I mentioned earlier, I am where I want to be right now, my highest and best use, and how I could serve, my people, serve society, serve my interests, serve my family. So I don't know if you asked what is my 5-year plan right now, I would say it'd be something like travel. I want to make see more places in the world. But I always feel that there's something else that's I'm going to be asked to do.
Yeah.
I'll fit
You,
in somewhere.
you certainly have been tireless in your support for others. I
Yeah.
know we've seen you when I was at Yale, seen you over the years, and that's still true today. You still stay connected, and you're always willing to help. Which leads me to, because I do think of you as being always very energized and very happy.
Yeah.
How do you stay balanced? Clearly you have a busy schedule, and clearly your 5-year planning has worked out.
Yeah.
But how do you stay balanced and energized? And what advice do you give to those of us who kind of struggle with that? That we struggle with a little bit of that, the juggling of the daily demands.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, certainly during COVID, I kind of have a regime, of staying informed and being involved. I think social networking. I don't do so much social networking, like the younger people do, but I really thrived on actually alumni activities from high school,
Yes.
college, and law school, being connected, a small network of friends. I'm very connected to LA and its history. I'm on a redistricting commission here that's taking in the 2020 census. So I feel a good sense of neighborhood. And I think it's just being involved. And just doing that gives me energy. I love reading about the history of my neighborhood and how it has evolved since 1866. I'm in touch with people who still live in that area. So I think it's just really a matter, being involved and connected gives me the energy I need to face each day. Not that, this COVID thing has hit me as it's hit a lot of people. I think I'm doing okay, relatively speaking, but I do miss, as everybody does, going out to social occasions, restaurants, and so forth. So don't get me wrong, it has been a and I think as long as I stay active and people see the roles I'm playing, they'll still come to me and for advice or whatever. But you also have to reach out.
Yeah.
You have to reach out to the high schools. I'm on a pre-law sort of preparation board that works with young minorities who want to go to law school. Well, I have a lot to say in my role, as a judge to help them along. And I think the students coming up now are very fortunate to have people like me and you and others who can give them guidance and advice.
Yeah.
So I'll continue to do that as long as I can.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And I think there's, when you're doing what you love and there's a lot of satisfaction from also getting, that you get from helping others, right?
Right.
That there's a sense of purpose and outcomes that really benefit others, that really brings you that satisfaction that it hardly feels like work eventually.
Yeah, that brings to mind something kind of related to that you get more out of than what you put in on a lot of these things. And one of the most challenging things that I did with my wife was first being a guardian, then adopting a severely autistic niece. We took her out of the New Jersey foster care system. Well, she never even got into foster care. She was in dependency, protective services. But I learned so much about deficiencies in the child protective system. I later served on a statewide board in California because of that experience. And just seeing that the progress the child made, I mean, she's still not fully developed, and she never will be because of the delay in the intervention. I felt that when you ask, what's your greatest accomplishment? It would be sort of rescuing that child adopting her, giving her the best opportunities we could in terms of therapies and so forth, that you don't get that kind of opportunity to do in your life. But when you do it, I think you get a lot more back in terms of a reward, if you want to call it a reward, in terms of your outlook and an appreciation for how society can be improved. And you can be a small part of that, even on the micro level of dealing with one child and learning about the systems that we have and how we deal with that. You know, currently the homeless situation is another kind of, you know, massive societal problem. It's probably intractable, but as a society, we have to unite to come to grips with it and to do something, because it's just simply intolerable.
Yeah. No, and you certainly have stayed involved in a number of different you volunteer in a number of different ways. And it's these experiences, right, that inform us and help our decision making. And, you know, I've always thought of, I think back to my Yale experience and think, you know, especially those times when I felt a lack of belonging sometimes, but then I recognize that we're at a place where we're also sharing our experiences, right? And it's important that people we're in college with leave and, you know, have insights to different worlds that we bring. So it's really important, I think, for that lifelong journey.
Right. Yeah. You know, we're not unique in that respect, as the longer I've been removed from Yale, but still in connection with, connected to other alums. Everybody, regardless of where you're from, you have some difficulty in making that adjustment. Yale is an overwhelming place to everyone. Some people have a little bit harder than others, but everyone goes through that transition. Because when you're at Yale, everyone likely was first in their class, had good scores, and are interesting people. And as you get away from it, you say, well, yeah, we all have something really deeply in common besides our affection for the university and how it's helped us along the way. And believe me, I think it's helped me certainly in terms of opening doors and having people take notice. Oh, you went to Yale. I know someone who went to Yale, and the networking aspect. I've always felt it's very important to be, in terms of networking that we were talking about, to network, you know, with your professional school, in my case, law school, college, even high school, just to get that kind of feedback and to help where you can.
Yeah, no, those networks have been really, really great. I think of Yale and I think about it. It's kind of the gift that keeps on giving. I was actually just on a call not long ago, a Zoom call, and met new classmates. And
All right.
it's really great to keep that those networks going. So what do you hope comes from your continued involvement in these organizations and your appointments? As a trustee at Yale, what do you hope comes from that, and what do you hope for Yale in the future?
You know, well, I'm very pleased by efforts that Yale is making in terms of outreach and diversity in faculty, in terms of diversity of the student admissions, providing so many more opportunities for students who are there, in terms of summer fellowships and things like that barely existed, at least when I was there. I think for me, it's really a continuation of kind of a lifelong connection to Yale, something that I never really, thought ahead of anyway. But getting involved in the Alumni Schools Committee here in Greater Los Angeles and recruiting students to go. The first Latina, by the way, Rosana Anaya, back in 1969, to get her to go to Yale. So that's always been a driving force connecting to Yale. Later being on the AY Board of Governors and as an at-large representative to the Assembly. I was actually president of the Yale Club of Southern California back in the late 90s, a time when the club needed to be revived. And three of us formed a pact that we would each serve for 2 years, do a good job. You remember Fernando Inzunza
Yeah.
he was the treasurer of the group, and sort of getting the club to be financially stabilized, and just a number of things that we did to revitalize the club here. Now it's moved on to Yale and Hollywood because there are a lot of Yale people in the industry. So, why do I do that? It's as some people say, it's what I do.
Well, now you have a lot of hermanos and hermanas.
Yes, yeah, and what gives me great joy is the Yale Latino Alumni Association, and just getting together across all generations, really. And it as one of the first, it's like in one way, it's like, not that I say you're my children, but it's nice to see what has happened, since the late 60s to now. Whenever I go back and I meet with Latino students, it's just amazing. I wish I were there sometimes again to take advantage of everything that is going on now. I think a lot of alums feel that, hey, boy, I should have dug in more, got more involved at Yale. I certainly feel that way.
Yeah.
But the kernel of knowledge that I got out of there has served me well. But I think all of us, here's a quote from Don Nakanishi's class. Lo Chun Hoon from Hawaii, he's a lawyer, class of 71. We were talking about Yale for some reason. And someone said, yeah, well, Yale is an experience. And then Lo says, Yale is a way of life. And that it rings so true. I'm probably sounding like I'm being paid by Yale to say these things. I'm not. I'll swear to that. But it had that kind of impact on me, and I'm sure on a lot of other people.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there's always so many ways to connect, and wherever you might be in sort of in your life, there's moments where we kind of take a break. But I've always felt I could always come back and connect with friends, and going back to Los Angeles sometimes and visit with you all. It's really a great experience.
Yeah. And speaking about being a student at Yale again, if I were to do that, and I could online, of course, but I would love to take a course in art history, but it would be art history with a focus on the local political situation. Because art, whether it's painting or opera, it's always a reflection of the times. So whether it's Guernica, Picasso, in the Spanish Republican War, there's always something in art I've learned, but I wish I could study it to see how, they say that artists are always kind of at the forefront, the avant-garde of political change. I believe that. That's why they're repressed, but I wish I'm sure there's a course somewhere, but I'd love a course like that. Similarly, opera, particularly Italian opera, always reflects what's going on, for example, in Italy at the time. But it'd be nice to do something. If that were the course I was going to take, I'd take on something like that.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure they'd like to have you back as a student anytime you'd like.
Oh God, yeah.
Well, Carlos, I think we've come to the end of our time. I just want to thank you for spending time with me, and also just remind you that you've created a sense of belonging for many of us Latinos at Yale. You've always made us feel like familia, and opened up the doors for many of us. And so now, we're thousands. And we live all over the country, all over the world. And so thank you for always, supporting us through our aspirations, whether it be that student in high school to go to Yale, or professionally You've always led with kindness and compassion. And so for all you've done, for all you continue to do, thank you. We have much gratitude for your service, and you truly are a hero and a champion for many of us. So thanks for spending time with me today, Carlos, and thanks to the audience. And for more Impact Series content, you can visit the Yale Alumni Association website and channels. But Carlos, thank you again. It's been really a treat for me to be here with you.
Well, thank you. It's my pleasure.
Goodbye.